The evening rush at Café Lumière was just beginning to slow down when the rain started. Not a gentle spring shower, but the kind of downpour that sent people rushing for cover and kept the cafe doors swinging. For Lily, it meant another busy night when she had hoped to get home early to study for her music theory exam. Table 7 needs their check. And 12 just sat down, called out Miguel from behind the bar, sliding 2 fresh cappuccinos across the counter. Lily nodded, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear as she balanced the drinks on her tray. 3 years of working at this upscale restaurant had made her an expert at carrying multiple plates and glasses without spilling a drop. What had started as a temporary job to pay the bills had somehow become her life. The cafe was known for its gourmet food and elegant atmosphere, but what Lily loved most was the grand piano that sat in the corner. It was a beautiful instrument, polished to a shine and positioned so that the light from the crystal chandeliers made it glow. On weekend evenings, the restaurant hired musicians to play soft melodies while people dined, but on weeknights like tonight, the piano sat silent. Every time Lily walked past it, she felt a pull, like the piano was calling to her. Her fingers would twitch slightly against her serving tray, playing invisible notes. It had been so long since she'd felt the smooth keys beneath her fingertips. "Lily, table 15 needs more water," her manager called, snapping her out of her daydream. As she filled water glasses and took orders, Lily kept glancing at the clock. If she hurried, she might still have time to review her notes before falling asleep. Night classes were tough after double shifts, but she was determined to finish her degree, even if it took years longer than she'd planned. Just as she was clearing a table near the window, the door opened, letting in a gust of wind and rain. A man stepped inside, shaking water from his umbrella. He was tall, with silver-gray hair, and wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than Lily made in 3 months. His presence immediately changed the energy of the room. He carried himself with the easy confidence of someone used to being in charge. Miguel caught Lily's eye from across the restaurant and nodded toward the newcomer. It was her turn to seat the next customer. She grabbed a menu and approached the man with a smile. "Good evening, sir. Just one tonight?" she asked. The man's eyes, bright blue and alert despite the late hour, studied her face for a moment before he answered. "Yes, just me. Would you have a quiet table? Preferably near the piano." Lily led him to a small table in the corner, close to the gleaming grand piano but away from the busier sections of the restaurant. As she handed him the menu, she noticed his hands, strong with long fingers, the hands of someone who might play an instrument. "The special tonight is herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables. Can I start you off with something to drink?" she asked. "Sparkling water for now, and I'll look over the menu," he replied, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. "Thank you, Lily," she supplied. "Thank you, Lily." As she walked away to get his water, she felt his gaze following her. Not in the uncomfortable way some customers watched the waitstaff, but with curiosity, as if trying to figure something out. Throughout the next hour, Lily served her other tables while occasionally checking on the man, who ordered the salmon special and a glass of expensive wine. He ate slowly, sometimes looking up from his meal to watch the other diners or glance at the piano. Once, when she was refilling his water, she noticed he was tapping his fingers against the tablecloth in a familiar pattern. It was the opening notes to Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Without thinking, Lily's own fingers mirrored the movement against her serving tray. The man caught the gesture and smiled. "You play?" he asked, caught off guard. Lily felt her cheeks warm. "I used to," she admitted. "A long time ago, but not anymore." She shook her head. Life got in the way. He nodded as if he understood perfectly. Life has a habit of doing that. As the evening wore on, the restaurant gradually emptied. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and most diners had paid their bills and left. Only a few tables remained occupied, including the one with the silver-haired man, who was now sipping a cup of coffee and reading something on his phone. Lily was wiping down a nearby table when she heard him call her name. She approached, expecting him to ask for the check. Instead, he gestured to the chair across from him. "Would you mind sitting for a moment, if you're not too busy?" Lily glanced around. The restaurant was quiet, and Miguel gave her a small nod from behind the bar. She slid into the chair, suddenly aware of her tired feet and the coffee stain on her apron. "I've been watching you all evening," the man said, then quickly added, "Not in a strange way, I hope." I noticed how you look at that piano every time you walk by. Your fingers move too, playing music only you can hear. Lily felt exposed, as if this stranger had somehow read her thoughts. Force of habit, I guess. My name is Thomas Blackwood, he said, extending his hand across the table. Lily shook it, her eyes widening slightly as she recognized the name. Everyone in the city knew of Thomas Blackwood, the tech entrepreneur whose software company had made him millions. His face occasionally appeared in business magazines and local news. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Blackwood. Thomas, please. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with those sharp blue eyes. Tell me, Lily, why did you stop playing? The question was personal, but something about his manner made it seem like a natural thing to ask. Maybe it was the late hour, or the nearly empty restaurant, or simply the fact that someone was actually interested in her story. My mom got sick during my second year of music school, she explained, tracing a pattern on the tablecloth. Cancer. I had to drop out to work full-time, help with medical bills. By the time Lily paused, swallowing hard. By the time she was gone, I couldn't afford to go back. So I kept working, started taking night classes in business instead. More practical, you know? Thomas nodded slowly. And now you work double shifts and go to school at night with no time for music. How did you know about the double shifts? He smiled. Your manager mentioned it when I complimented the service. He said you're his hardest worker. Lily looked down, embarrassed by the praise. Just doing my job. The piano, Thomas said, changing the subject slightly. Do you miss it? The question hit her like a physical blow. Did she miss it? She missed it like she would miss breathing if the air were suddenly gone. She missed the way her thoughts quieted when she played, how the world narrowed to just her and the music. She missed the feeling of accomplishment when she mastered a difficult piece. The way her mother used to close her eyes and smile when Lily played her favorite songs. Every day, she answered simply. Thomas nodded as if he'd confirmed something important. He glanced at the piano, then back at Lily. That's a beautiful instrument. Steinway, isn't it? Yes, the owner brings in tuners every month to keep it in perfect condition. Lily smiled slightly. Sometimes I come in early just to hear them work on it. But you've never played it yourself? Lily shook her head. Staff aren't allowed to touch it. It's only for the professional musicians on weekends. For a moment, Thomas was quiet, looking thoughtfully at his coffee cup. The restaurant had grown even quieter with just 2 other tables still occupied. Rain tapped gently against the windows, and somewhere in the kitchen, dishes clinked as the staff began cleanup. What would you say? Thomas finally spoke, his voice low but clear. If I told you I'd like to hear you play that piano? Lily laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. I'd say that's against the rules and I need this job too much to break them. What if I spoke to your manager? Got permission? She stared at him, trying to understand why this wealthy stranger would care whether she played the piano or not. Why would you do that? Thomas set down his coffee cup and leaned forward. Because I recognize something in you, Lily. Something I've seen before. There's a difference between someone who played piano and someone who was meant to play. You're the latter. His words stirred something inside her, a feeling she'd tried to bury under practical concerns and responsibilities. Before she could respond, he continued. I have a proposition for you, but first I need to know if you're willing to take a chance tonight, to step away from serving tables for just 5 minutes and remember who you were before life got in the way. The way he said it made it sound so simple, as if years of buried dreams could be unearthed in an instant. Part of her wanted to refuse, to protect herself from the pain of touching something she'd given up. But another part, the part that still played piano in her dreams, leaned toward his words like a flower seeking sunlight. Outside, the rain had stopped, and moonlight was breaking through the clouds, casting silver patterns on the restaurant floor. It felt like a moment balanced on the edge of something important, a crossroads she hadn't seen coming when she woke up that morning. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Blackwood? Lily asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Thomas Blackwood smiled. And in that moment, Lily knew her ordinary Tuesday night was about to become anything but ordinary. Thomas Blackwood reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek leather wallet. I'd like to make you an offer, Lily, he said, his voice low but clear in the quiet restaurant. Lily shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She'd heard stories about wealthy customers making inappropriate offers to waitstaff. And despite Thomas's respectful demeanor so far, alarm bells started ringing in her head. As if reading her thoughts, Thomas smiled kindly. Nothing improper, I assure you. My proposition is simple. I want you to play one piece on that piano. In return, I'll leave a $10,000 tip. Lily's breath caught in her throat. 10,000? The amount was so large her brain couldn't process it. That was more than she made in 4 months of double shifts. It could cover her tuition for next semester with enough left over to fix her car, and maybe even move to a better apartment. $10,000, Thomas confirmed. One piece, your choice. Lily looked toward the piano, then back at Thomas. This doesn't make sense. Why would you pay so much just to hear me play? You don't even know if I'm any good. I have a feeling about you, Thomas replied, leaning back in his chair. And sometimes in life we need to create opportunities for others that weren't created for us. Is this some kind of joke? Lily asked, still unable to believe the offer. Thomas's face grew more serious. I don't joke about music or money, Lily. Both are too important. The restaurant had grown even quieter. Only one other table was still occupied, an older couple lingering over dessert. Miguel was wiping glasses behind the bar, occasionally glancing their way with curiosity. I can't, Lily said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I haven't played in years, and like I said, staff aren't allowed to touch the piano. The not playing in years part is exactly why you should do this, Thomas said. As for permission, he gestured toward the manager's office. Would you mind asking your boss to join us for a moment? Heart-pounding, Lily stood and walked to the office where her manager, Hector, was doing end-of-day accounting. When she explained that a customer wanted to speak with him, Hector frowned but followed her back to the table. Mr. Blackwood, Hector said, recognition flashing in his eyes as he approached the table. Is everything all right with your meal? The food was excellent, Thomas assured him. I wanted to discuss something else with you. I understand you have a policy against staff playing the piano. Hector nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. The piano is reserved for our weekend performers only. I'd like to request an exception, Thomas said smoothly. I've learned that Lily here is a trained pianist, and I'd very much like to hear her play before I leave tonight. Hector looked uncomfortable, glancing between Lily and Thomas. Sir, I'm afraid that's not possible. The owner is very particular about— I understand completely, Thomas interrupted, pulling a business card from his wallet and handing it to Hector. Perhaps you could call the owner. I'd be happy to speak with them directly. Hector stared at the card, his eyes widening slightly as he fully registered who was sitting in his restaurant. Thomas Blackwood wasn't just wealthy. He was influential, the kind of customer whose good word could boost business for months. Let me make a quick call, Hector said, stepping away with his phone already in hand. Left alone again with Thomas, Lily twisted her apron nervously. Even if he gets permission, I told you, I haven't played in years. I'll embarrass myself. Music isn't something you forget, Thomas said quietly. It becomes part of you. Your fingers might be rusty, but your heart will remember. Across the restaurant, the couple at the remaining table were asking for their check. Miguel brought it to them, then walked over to where Lily and Thomas sat. Everything okay? He asked Lily, his eyes curious. Before she could answer, Hector returned, his expression a mixture of surprise and something else, maybe excitement. Mr. Blackwood, he said, I've spoken with the owner. He says if you're requesting it personally, then of course Lily may play the piano. He turned to Lily. Just one song, though. Lily felt the blood drain from her face. This was really happening. The idea of playing after so long, in front of people no less, made her stomach twist into knots. I'm not sure I can do this, she whispered. Thomas stood, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You can. One piece, that's all. Miguel, who had been listening to the exchange, leaned in. What's going on? Hector quickly explained the situation. Miguel's eyebrows shot up and he looked at Lily with new interest. You never told us you played piano. It never came up, Lily said weakly. By now, the couple had paid their bill and were putting on their coats, but they paused when they noticed the small gathering near Thomas's table. Is something happening? The woman asked. A special performance, Thomas announced, loud enough for them to hear. If you're not in a hurry, you might want to stay for it. The couple exchanged glances, then the man shrugged. We're not in a rush, Lily felt trapped. Everyone was looking at her expectantly. She glanced at the piano, its polished surface gleaming under the restaurant lights. It had been 5 years since she'd last played. 5 years of pushing aside that part of herself to focus on survival. "What about my other tables?" she asked, a last desperate attempt to escape. "Your section is cleared out," Miguel said, not helping at all. "It's after closing anyway." Thomas reached into his wallet again and pulled out a stack of bills, placing them on the table. "As promised, $10,000. It's yours whether you play wonderfully or terribly. No strings attached." Lily stared at the money. It seemed impossible, too good to be true. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again. Thomas's blue eyes held a hint of sadness. "Let's just say I understand what it means to set aside a passion. Sometimes we need a push to remember who we really are." From the kitchen, the cooking staff had begun to emerge, curious about the delay in closing. Even the dishwasher, a teenager named Raj, poked his head out to see what was happening. "What's going on?" he asked one of the cooks. "Apparently Lily's going to play the piano," the cook whispered back. Within minutes, it seemed, the entire restaurant staff had gathered, forming a small audience. The couple who had been about to leave took seats at a nearby table, watching with interest. Lily felt her heart hammering against her ribs. This wasn't just Thomas anymore. This was everyone she worked with, waiting to see if she could actually play or if she'd make a fool of herself. "You don't have to do this," Hector said, noticing her distress. "We can explain to Mr. Blackwood—" "No," Lily said suddenly, surprising herself. "I'll do it." With shaking hands, she untied her apron and handed it to Miguel. The walk to the piano felt like the longest journey of her life. Each step brought back memories. Her first recital at age 7, the scholarship competition she'd won at 18, her mother's proud face in the audience, and then the practice rooms at music school gathering dust as she spent her days in hospital, waiting rooms instead. The piano bench was cool and smooth as she sat down. Lily ran her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them, reacquainting herself with their feel. The ivory was pristine, so different from the worn keys of the upright piano she'd grown up with. "What are you going to play?" Miguel whispered from a few feet away. Lily thought for a moment. What could her rusty fingers manage after so long? Her mind went to the piece she'd been working on before she left music school, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It had been her mother's favorite, the last piece she'd perfected before everything fell apart. "Chopin," she said softly. "Nocturne in E-flat major." A hush fell over the small crowd. Thomas took a seat where he could see both Lily and the keyboard. He nodded encouragingly. Lily closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing heart. Her fingers positioned themselves over the keys, muscle memory kicking in despite the years away. She took a deep breath, and then, before she could think herself out of it, she began to play. The first notes were hesitant, her fingers stiff and unsure. A wrong note slipped in, then another, making her wince. But she kept going, pushing through the mistakes. By the end of the first phrase, something began to shift. It was like stepping into a river. At first, the current was jarring, but then her body remembered how to move with it. The melody began to flow more naturally, her hands remembering what her conscious mind had forgotten. As she played, the years of absence seemed to melt away. The restaurant around her faded from her awareness, and it was just Lily and the music, reunited after too long apart. She reached the middle section, where the piece grew more complex, her left hand creating a gentle pulse while her right wove the delicate melody above it. Her fingers found their way, dancing across the keys with growing confidence. The music filled the restaurant, floating up to the high ceilings and wrapping around the silent listeners. In that moment, Lily remembered who she had been before life's hardships had forced her to set aside her dreams. She remembered the joy of creating something beautiful, of expressing emotions too complex for words. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she kept them closed, letting the music carry her. As she approached the final section, her fingers moved with certainty, as if they'd never stopped playing. The piece's bittersweet melody told the story of her own life, the beauty and the sorrow, the dreams deferred but not forgotten. When she played the final chord, letting it resonate before gently lifting her hands from the keys, the silence that followed felt sacred. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Lily opened her eyes, suddenly self-conscious. Had she played as badly as she feared? She turned to look at her audience. What she saw made her breath catch. Miguel was wiping his eyes discreetly. Hector stood with his mouth slightly open. The couple who had stayed to listen were holding hands, looking at her with awe. And Thomas was smiling, a smile that reached his eyes and transformed his whole face. Then, as if waking from a spell, everyone began to applaud. The sound was startlingly loud after the music, echoing off the restaurant walls. One of the cooks whistled. Raj was clapping so enthusiastically it looked like he might hurt himself. "That was beautiful," the woman from the couple called out. Lily felt her cheeks burning. She stood shakily, unsure what to do or say. Playing had unleashed something inside her, longing, grief, and a fierce joy that frightened her with its intensity. Thomas approached the piano, his applause slowing to a stop as he reached her. "You see?" he said quietly. "Your fingers remembered." Looking into his kind eyes, Lily realized something important had just happened, something that couldn't be undone. The wall she'd built between her present life and her past dreams had cracked open, and she wasn't sure if she could or wanted to repair it. "Thank you," she whispered. But whether she was thanking him for the money or for something far more valuable, she wasn't entirely sure. The applause finally died down, and Lily felt as if she were waking from a dream. Her hands were still tingling from playing. Muscle memory awakened after years of dormancy. The restaurant staff began to disperse, returning to their closing duties, but their glances toward her had changed. There was respect in their eyes, maybe even a bit of awe. The couple who had stayed to listen approached her before leaving. "That was truly special," the woman said, touching Lily's arm gently. "Thank you for sharing your gift." Lily mumbled a thank you, still overwhelmed by what had just happened. As they walked away, she heard the woman say to her husband, "Imagine having talent like that and working as a waitress." The words stung, though Lily knew they weren't meant unkindly. It was the same thought she'd been pushing away for years. Thomas Blackwood still stood near the piano, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. When the restaurant had emptied except for the staff finishing their closing tasks, he gestured to the table where they had been sitting earlier. The stack of bills still lay there, untouched. "Shall we sit for a moment?" he asked. Lily nodded, her legs feeling unsteady as she followed him. As they sat down, Miguel appeared with 2 cups of steaming tea. "On the house," he said with a warm smile. "Boss's orders." He gave Lily a little bow before walking away, a gesture that would have seemed mocking any other night but now felt sincere. Thomas pushed the money toward her. "You've more than earned this." Lily stared at it, still unable to believe it was real. "I can't take that much just for playing one piece." "You can and you will," Thomas said firmly. "A deal is a deal." His expression softened. "Besides, I suspect you could use it." Lily thought of her mounting student loans, her mother's lingering medical bills, the rent that was due next week. Slowly, she reached out and took the money, tucking it into her pocket. "Thank you," she said. "I don't understand why you're doing this, but thank you." Thomas took a sip of his tea before answering. "Music saved my life once," he said quietly. I recognize the look of someone who's lost their way back to it. "I didn't lose my way," Lily said, a flash of defensiveness rising in her. "I made a choice. My mother needed me." Thomas nodded. "I'm not judging your choices, Lily. Life forces hard decisions on all of us. But sometimes when we set something aside for too long, we forget it was ever an option." Lily wrapped her hands around the warm teacup, letting his words sink in. It was true. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped thinking of music as a possibility. It had become a closed chapter, a road not taken. "Tell me about your mother," Thomas said gently. The question caught her off guard. People rarely asked about her mom anymore. It was as if the world expected her grief to have an expiration date. "She was a kindergarten teacher," Lily said, a small smile forming at the memory, the kind who knew every student's favorite color and kept their artwork for years. "She loved music but couldn't play herself. When I showed interest in piano, she worked extra jobs to pay for lessons. She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was. Lily traced the rim of her teacup with her finger. "When she got sick, there was never any question about what I'd do. She'd given up so much for me. It was my turn." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "And what would she think hearing you play tonight?" The question hit Lily like a physical blow. She had to blink back sudden tears. "She'd be happy," she said finally. "And sad that I stopped." "Why did you?" Thomas asked. "After she passed, I mean. Why not return to music school?" Lily gave a small, bitter laugh. "Money, time, life, pick one," she sighed. By the time everything was settled, I was in debt from the medical bills. The scholarship I'd had was gone. It seemed smarter to study business, get a stable job. And how is that working out for you? The question wasn't asked unkindly, but its directness made Lily flinch. She glanced around the restaurant at the half-wiped tables and the chairs being stacked for the night. I'm getting by, she said, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Thomas leaned forward, his eyes intent. Lily, I didn't come to Café Lumière by accident tonight. She frowned. What do you mean? I was having dinner with a friend last week, Hector's brother as it happens. He mentioned a waitress who always lingered near the piano, who sometimes hummed classical pieces under her breath while serving. It reminded me of myself at your age, working in a hotel restaurant, stealing moments at the lobby piano when no one was watching. You were a pianist? Lily asked, surprised. Thomas nodded. Before I was a businessman, yes. I had dreams of concert halls and recording contracts. A shadow passed over his face. Life had other plans. Like you, I made choices. Unlike you, I never found my way back. Something clicked into place for Lily. That's why you did this. The money making me play. I've been where you are, Thomas said. Talent set aside for practical concerns. The years pass and suddenly you're my age, successful by most measures but wondering what might have been. He gestured toward the piano. When I heard you play just now, I knew I was right. You don't belong in a life that doesn't include music. Lily felt a surge of emotions, gratitude, confusion, and something else. Something like hope that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Even if that's true, she said carefully, one night of playing doesn't change reality. I still have bills to pay, classes to finish. Perhaps, Thomas said, reaching into his jacket and pulling out a business card. But reality has more possibilities than we sometimes allow ourselves to see. He placed the card on the table between them. It was simple and elegant, with just his name and contact information. I'd like to make you another offer, he said, more significant than tonight's. Lily tensed. Despite his kindness so far, she was still wary. What kind of offer? I serve on the board of the Wilson Institute of Music, Thomas said. It's a small but prestigious school downtown. They have a special program for returning students, those who had to interrupt their education due to personal circumstances. Lily's heart began to beat faster. She knew the Wilson Institute by reputation. It was one of the best music schools in the state, with an impressive record of graduates going on to successful careers. I'd like to recommend you for their program, Thomas continued. Full scholarship. They're always looking for exceptional talent, and after what I heard tonight, I have no doubt you qualify. Lily sat back, stunned. You can't be serious. I rarely joke about important matters, Thomas reminded her. The spring semester begins in January. That gives you 3 months to prepare. Prepare? I haven't seriously practiced in 5 years. And what about my job? My apartment? My current classes? The possibilities were spinning in Lily's head, tantalizing but frightening. Details, Thomas said with a wave of his hand. Important details, yes, but not insurmountable obstacles. The question is, Lily, he leaned forward again, his gaze intense. Do you want this? If all those practical concerns could be addressed, would you want to return to music? The question hung in the air between them. Lily closed her eyes, thinking of how it had felt to play again, how the music had flowed through her, how right it had seemed despite the years away. Then she thought of her mother, who had sacrificed so much for Lily's talent, who had believed in her even when Lily hadn't believed in herself. Yes, she whispered, opening her eyes. I would want that more than anything. Thomas smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face. Then let's make it happen. Just like that? Lily asked, disbelief evident in her voice. It won't be just like that, Thomas cautioned. It will require hard work, dedication, and courage on your part. But the opportunity, yes, I can offer that just like that. From across the restaurant, Hector called out that they were locking up in 5 minutes. Lily nodded to acknowledge him, then turned back to Thomas. Why would you do this for a stranger? She asked, still trying to understand. Thomas was quiet for a moment, staring into his teacup. When I was 30, I had a choice to make, he said finally. Continue struggling as a musician or accept a job offer in the tech industry. I chose security. It was the sensible choice, and I've built a good life. He looked up at her. But there are nights when I sit alone at my piano and wonder who I might have become if someone had created a different path for me. He stood, buttoning his jacket. Take my card. Think about it. Call me tomorrow or next week or never. It's entirely your choice. Lily picked up the card, turning it over in her fingers. And if I say yes? Then we'll meet again to discuss the details. The scholarship, living arrangements, how to balance work and study until you're established. He paused. I have resources, Lily, and connections. What I don't have is your talent or your youth. I can open doors, but only you can walk through them. Hector approached their table, keys jingling in his hand. Sorry, Mr. Blackwood, but we really need to close now. Of course, Thomas said, reaching for his coat. Thank you for your hospitality and for bending the rules tonight. Hector smiled. After hearing Lily play, I think we might need to bend them more often. He turned to Lily. Take tomorrow off. Paid leave. You earned it after that performance. Lily thanked him, still feeling like she was in a dream. As they walked toward the door, Thomas paused. One more thing, he said. Whatever you decide about the Institute, don't stop playing again. Even if it's just for yourself in a practice room somewhere, music like yours shouldn't be silenced. They stepped outside into the cool night air. The rain had stopped completely, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. A sleek black car was waiting at the curb, a driver standing by the open door. Can I offer you a ride home? Thomas asked. Lily shook her head. Thank you, but I live close. I could use the walk to clear my head. Thomas nodded. Good night then, Lily. I hope to hear from you soon. As he got into the car, Lily called out, Mr. Blackwood? He turned, one foot still on the pavement. Thank you, she said simply. Not just for the money or the offer. For making me play again, Thomas smiled. Thank you for reminding me why music matters. The car door closed and Lily watched as it pulled away from the curb, its taillights disappearing around a corner. She stood alone on the sidewalk, the weight of Thomas's business card in one pocket, the stack of bills in the other. Ahead of her stretched two possible futures, the safe, practical path she'd been following for years, or a return to the dreams she'd set aside. Both had risks, both had potential rewards. As Lily began to walk home, her steps fell into a familiar rhythm, matching the tempo of the nocturne she'd played earlier. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a life filled with music again, not just as a memory or a regret, but as a living, breathing possibility. Lily didn't sleep that night. She lay awake in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling while her mind replayed the evening's events. Her fingers moved unconsciously, practicing Chopin on an invisible keyboard. The money Thomas had given her sat on her nightstand, still hard to believe. $10,000 for 5 minutes of playing. But it wasn't the money keeping her awake. It was the feeling that had rushed through her when she played, like finding a piece of herself she'd forgotten was missing. When morning light finally filtered through her thin curtains, Lily got up and made coffee. Her apartment was tiny, just one room with a kitchenette and bathroom, but the rent was manageable on a waitress's salary. She decorated it with secondhand furniture and colorful thrift store finds, trying to make it feel like home. In the corner sat the one luxury she'd allowed herself, a digital keyboard with weighted keys, covered with a sheet. She hadn't touched it in months. Now, coffee in hand, she approached it slowly and pulled the sheet away. Dust had settled on the keys. Lily wiped them clean with the edge of her sleeve, then sat down on the bench. Without plugging in the keyboard, she began to move her fingers across the silent keys, playing the nocturne from memory. Even without sound, the motion felt right. Like her hands were finally doing what they were meant to do. Lily reached over and switched on the power. She put on the headphones hanging from the side of the keyboard so she wouldn't disturb her neighbors and began to play again. The sound quality couldn't compare to the grand piano at the restaurant, but it didn't matter. The music was there, waiting for her, as if it had been patiently standing by all these years. She played until her coffee grew cold, until her back ached from sitting too long in one position, until the sun had climbed high in the sky. When she finally stopped, her decision was made. Lily reached for her phone and Thomas's business card. Before she could change her mind, she dialed the number. Mr. Blackwood's office. A polite voice answered. This is Lily Chen, she said, suddenly nervous. He asked me to call. One moment, please. There was a brief silence, and then Thomas's voice came on the line. Lily, I'm glad you called. I want to do it, she said quickly before her courage could fail. The Wilson Institute. If the offer is still open. It is, Thomas replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Are you free to meet this afternoon? There's someone I'd like you to meet. 4 hours later, Lily found herself in the elegant lobby of the Wilson Institute of Music. The building was historic, with high ceilings and marble floors that made every footstep echo. Display cases showed photographs of famous graduates, programs from notable performances, and awards won by students and faculty. Thomas met her at the entrance, dressed in another impeccable suit. Right on time, he said warmly, shaking her hand. Nervous? Terrified, Lily admitted. Good, it means you care. He gestured toward a hallway. This way. Dean Rivera is expecting us. As they walked, Lily heard music drifting from practice rooms, a violin somewhere, a flute in another room, voices raised in harmony. Each sound made her heart beat a little faster. This could be her world again. They stopped at a door with a brass nameplate. Elena Rivera, Dean of Students. Thomas knocked, and a voice called for them to enter. Dean Rivera was a small woman with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a neat bun. She stood as they entered, extending her hand first to Thomas, then to Lily. Ms. Chen, she said, her handshake firm. Mr. Blackwood has told me about you. Please sit down. Lily perched on the edge of a chair, trying not to fidget. The dean's office was filled with books, scores, and framed photographs of her with various musicians. A baby grand piano stood in the corner, its lid closed. Thomas rarely recommends students to me, Dean Rivera said, studying Lily with keen eyes. When he does, I pay attention. He says you've been away from music for some time. 5 years, Lily said. Almost 6. And yet he claims you played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major beautifully last night with minimal preparation. Lily glanced at Thomas, who nodded encouragingly. I wouldn't say beautifully. There were mistakes. Honesty, the dean said with approval. Good. Many students exaggerate their abilities. She stood and walked to the piano. Would you play something for me now? Lily's mouth went dry. Now? Unless you'd prefer to schedule a formal audition? Thomas interjected gently. Elena, she hasn't been practicing regularly. Perhaps it's okay, Lily said, standing. I can play. She moved to the piano, adjusting the bench as Dean Rivera opened the lid. The instrument was obviously well maintained, its black surface gleaming in the afternoon light. What would you like me to play? Lily asked. Your choice, the dean replied, stepping back. Something that shows what you can do. Lily thought for a moment. The Nocturne was fresh in her mind from last night, but she wanted to show versatility. She decided on Bach's Prelude in C major from the Well-Tempered Clavier, a piece she had once known by heart. Taking a deep breath, she began to play. The Bach was different from the Chopin, more structured with a constant flow of arpeggiated chords. It required precision and clarity, rather than emotional expression. Lily's fingers were still stiff, but the pattern came back to her, the familiar progression of harmonies guiding her hands. She made mistakes, a wrong note here, a hesitation there, but she kept going, focusing on the architecture of the piece. When she finished, she folded her hands in her lap, waiting. Dean Rivera was silent for a long moment. Then she exchanged a look with Thomas before turning back to Lily. You're rusty, she said bluntly. Your technique needs serious work. Your timing was inconsistent, and your left hand was noticeably weaker than your right. Lily's heart sank. She'd known it wouldn't be perfect, but hearing the critique laid out so clearly was painful. However, the dean continued, I heard musicality beneath the technical issues. You understand the language of Bach, which many students with better technique never grasp. She returned to her desk and sat down. You'd need intensive work before January. Private lessons, hours of daily practice. It would be challenging. I'm not afraid of hard work, Lily said quietly. No, I don't think you are. Dean Rivera opened a folder on her desk. Mr. Blackwood has outlined a scholarship proposal. Full tuition, plus a stipend for living expenses that would allow you to reduce your work hours and focus on preparation. Lily looked at Thomas in surprise. He hadn't mentioned the stipend. It's an investment in your future, he said simply. There's a condition, Dean Rivera added. You would need to pass a formal evaluation in December. If you haven't reached the required level by then, the scholarship would be withdrawn. Her expression softened slightly. It's not to be punitive. It's because placing you in classes you're not prepared for would set you up for failure. I understand, Lily said, her mind already calculating how many hours she could practice each day between shifts at the restaurant. There's more, Thomas said. I've arranged for Professor Han to give you private lessons twice a week until December, Lily gasped. Jin Han was one of the Institute's most renowned piano instructors, known for his exacting standards and brilliant students. He doesn't usually take on pre-enrollment students, Dean Rivera said, but he watched a video of your performance last night and agreed to make an exception. A video? Lily asked, confused. Thomas looked slightly embarrassed. The couple who stayed to listen recorded your performance on their phone. The wife recognized the piece and wanted to share it with her mother, who loves Chopin. They sent it to Hector this morning and he forwarded it to me. He paused. I hope you don't mind that I shared it with Elena and Professor Han. Lily wasn't sure how she felt about having been recorded without her knowledge, but it was too late to worry about that now. When would I start? She asked. Monday, the dean replied. 9 a.m. Professor Han's studio. She stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Mr. Blackwood believes in you, Ms. Chen. Professor Han sees potential. Now you need to prove them right. The next 3 months passed in a blur of work, practice, and lessons. Lily reduced her hours at Café Lumière to 3 nights a week, using Thomas's stipend to cover the gap in her income. She withdrew from her business classes, promising herself she would return to them only if music didn't work out. Professor Han was as demanding as his reputation suggested. During their first lesson, he listened to her play for 10 minutes, then spent the next hour detailing everything she needed to fix. He assigned technical exercises that made her fingers ache and pieces that seemed impossibly difficult. Your hands remember more than you think, he told her when she protested that a Beethoven sonata was beyond her current abilities. Trust them. Lily practiced 6 to 8 hours a day, stopping only when her neighbors complained about the noise from her digital keyboard, even through the headphones. Thomas solved that problem by arranging for her to use a practice room at the Institute, where she could play a real piano without disturbing anyone. The restaurant staff became her cheerleaders. Miguel brought her herbal tea for her hands. Hector adjusted her schedule whenever she needed time for an extra lesson. Even Raj, the young dishwasher, asked to hear her play when business was slow. The video of you has over 50,000 views now, he told her one night, showing her his phone. Someone had uploaded her performance to a social media platform with the caption, Waitress reveals hidden talent, stuns restaurant patrons. Lily was embarrassed but secretly pleased to see the positive comments. People who knew nothing about classical music had been moved by her playing. It reminded her why she had fallen in love with music in the first place, its power to touch hearts and bridge differences. Thomas checked in regularly, never interfering with her lessons but always ready with encouragement when she felt overwhelmed. Progress isn't linear, he reminded her when she hit plateaus. Keep going. December arrived with a mixture of holiday decorations and end-of-semester stress at the Institute. Students hurried through the halls carrying instruments and stacks of sheet music, preparing for final recitals and exams. Lily's evaluation was scheduled for December 15th. She would play for a panel of 3 faculty members, including Professor Han and Dean Rivera. Her program included Bach, Beethoven, and Chopin, pieces chosen to demonstrate technique, musicality, and emotional range. The night before her evaluation, she couldn't sleep, just as she hadn't slept the night after playing at the restaurant. But this time, instead of confusion, she felt a strange calm. Whatever happened tomorrow, she had reclaimed a part of herself these past months. No one could take that away. In the morning, she dressed carefully in a simple black dress she'd found at a consignment shop. As she was leaving her apartment, her phone chimed with a text message from Thomas. Your mother would be proud. Play for her today. Tears pricked Lily's eyes. Somehow he always knew the right thing to say. The evaluation room was stark, just a grand piano in the center and chairs for the panel. As Lily entered, Professor Han gave her a small nod. Dean Rivera smiled briefly. The third panelist, an older man Lily didn't recognize, looked up from his notes with a neutral expression. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Chen, Dean Rivera said. Lily took her place at the piano. Before beginning, she closed her eyes and pictured her mother's face, the way she used to look when Lily practiced at home, proud, loving, completely present in the moment. Then she pictured Thomas, who had seen something in her worth saving, and then she began to play. Later, she wouldn't remember much about the evaluation itself, just the feeling of being completely immersed in the music, of letting it flow through her without second-guessing or fear. When she finished the final piece, the same Chopin nocturne she'd played that fateful night at the restaurant, the room was silent. Professor Hahn spoke first. Your Bach was precise. Your Beethoven showed understanding of structure. But your Chopin, he paused, his usually stern face softening. Your Chopin made me forget I was evaluating you. I was simply listening to music. The older man nodded agreement. Technical issues remain, but those will resolve with time and practice. The foundation is solid. Dean Rivera made notes on a form before looking up. Ms. Chen, the panel is unanimous. You've met the requirements for admission to the program. Your scholarship will be activated for the January semester. She smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed her formal demeanor. Welcome to the Wilson Institute. Lily's hands trembled as she gathered her sheet music. Thank you, she managed to say. Thank you all. Outside the evaluation room, Thomas was waiting. One look at her face told him everything he needed to know. You did it, he said, his eyes bright with pride. Lily nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. 3 months ago, she had been a waitress with buried dreams and mounting debts. Now she was a piano student with a full scholarship and a future full of possibilities. How does it feel? Thomas asked as they walked through the Institute's grand hallway. Lily thought for a moment, trying to find the right words. Like coming home, she said finally. Like I found a piece of myself I thought was gone forever. Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. Music never really leaves us, he said quietly. It just waits for us to find our way back. Outside, snow had begun to fall, dusting the city with white. Lily looked up at the winter sky, feeling the cool flakes on her face. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive, truly herself. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with music in her heart, and the knowledge that second chances were possible. Sometimes, she thought, it just takes someone to believe in you before you can believe in yourself again. 1 year later, Lily stood backstage at the Wilson Institute's main concert hall, taking deep breaths to calm her racing heart. Through the curtain, she could hear the murmur of the audience gathering for the spring showcase, where first-year students would perform for faculty, family, and guests. Nervous? A voice asked beside her. Lily turned to see Zoe, a violinist who had become one of her closest friends at the Institute. They had bonded during late-night practice sessions and music theory study groups. Terrified, Lily admitted, but the good kind of terrified. Zoe squeezed her arm. You're going to be amazing. You've worked harder than anyone this year. It was true. Lily had thrown herself into her studies with a dedication that surprised even her demanding professors. The year had been challenging in ways she hadn't expected, not just the rigorous practice schedule and difficult coursework, but also the adjustment to being a student again at 26, surrounded by classmates mostly in their late teens and early 20s. 5 minutes performers, the stage manager called, walking past with a clipboard. Lily peeked through a gap in the curtains, scanning the audience for familiar faces. She spotted Thomas Blackwood in the 3rd row, sitting next to Hector from the cafe. Behind them were Miguel, Raj, and several other restaurant staff who had come to support her. Even Dean Rivera's usually stern expression had softened into something like anticipation. The showcase began with performances by string and wind instrument students. Lily was scheduled near the end, which gave her plenty of time to grow more anxious. She watched her classmates perform pieces they had perfected over months of practice. Some played with technical precision but little emotion. Others had passion but struggled with the more difficult passages. Finally, the announcer called her name. Our next performer is Lily Chen, piano, playing Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, Opus 23, No. 5. As Lily walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinded her. She bowed to the audience, then settled herself at the grand piano, adjusting the bench to the perfect height. The piece she had chosen was ambitious, a dramatic, technically demanding composition that Professor Hahn had initially discouraged her from attempting. It's too soon, he had warned. This piece requires maturity and technical mastery. But Lily had persisted, practicing the challenging sections until her fingers ached. She'd been drawn to the piece's passionate nature, its thundering bass notes contrasted with delicate flowing melodies. Something about it spoke to her journey, the struggle, the determination, the triumph. Now, as she placed her hands on the keys, she remembered Thomas's advice from months ago. Don't play for the audience or the judges. Play for yourself. Lily closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. Then she began to play. The opening chords were bold and commanding, filling the concert hall with rich sound. As she moved into the main theme, her hands flew across the keyboard with newfound confidence. The hours of practice had paid off. Her fingers knew exactly where to go, freeing her mind to focus on expression, on telling the story within the music. When she reached the middle section, where the tempo slowed and the melody became more introspective, Lily thought of her mother, of the sacrifices she had made, of the pride she would feel seeing her daughter on this stage. The music became more personal, more intimate, as if she were having a conversation with the audience rather than performing for them. The final section returned to the dramatic opening theme, building to a powerful conclusion. Lily's body moved with the music, no longer stiff with nerves but flowing with the rhythms and harmonies. As she played the final crashing chords, she felt a sense of release, of giving everything she had to the performance. The last note hung in the air for a moment before the audience erupted into applause. Lily stood and bowed, her legs shaky but her heart full. As she looked out at the audience, she saw Thomas on his feet, applauding with unrestrained enthusiasm. Next to him, Hector was wiping his eyes. Even some of the faculty members, usually reserved in their approval, were nodding appreciatively. Backstage, Professor Hahn was waiting for her. "You proved me wrong," he said simply. "Well done." Coming from him, it was the highest praise possible. After the showcase, a reception was held in the Institute's grand foyer. Students, faculty, and guests mingled, discussing the performances over refreshments. Lily found herself surrounded by well-wishers, including her former co-workers from the cafe. "We miss you," Miguel said, hugging her. "The new waitress doesn't hum classical music while serving coffee." "But we're so proud," Hector added. "The customers still talk about the night you played. Some come in hoping to see a repeat performance," Lily laughed. "Maybe I'll come back for a special appearance someday." As the crowd thinned, Thomas approached her, a small wrapped package in his hands. "You were magnificent," he said warmly. "Your mother would have been so proud." Lily smiled, touched by his continuing reference to her mother. Throughout the year, during their occasional lunches and check-ins, he had always found ways to include her mother's memory in Lily's new journey. "I have something for you," Thomas said, handing her the package. "A small graduation gift, though I know you have another year to go." Lily unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a vintage metronome, its wooden case polished to a warm glow. "It was mine when I was a student," Thomas explained. "I want you to have it." "I can't take this," Lily protested, knowing how precious such mementos must be to him. "You can, and you will," Thomas said, echoing his words from a year ago about the money. "It should belong to someone who will use it, not sit on my shelf gathering dust." Lily felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. Not just for this, but for everything. For seeing something in me I couldn't see myself." Thomas shook his head. "I merely opened a door. You chose to walk through it. And look how far you've come." Indeed, the changes in Lily's life went beyond her return to music. The confidence she had gained had spilled over into other areas. She carried herself differently now, spoke more assertively, dreamed more boldly. Her fellow students, despite being younger, looked to her as a leader, impressed by her dedication and life experience. "I have news," Thomas said, lowering his voice slightly. "I wasn't going to tell you until after the showcase. But the Institute is creating a new scholarship program for musicians who had to interrupt their education due to personal hardship." "Like me," Lily said, understanding immediately, exactly like you. "They're calling it the Second Movement Scholarship. Dean Rivera wants you to serve on the selection committee next year. Your perspective would be valuable." Lily was stunned. "I'd be honored." "There's more," Thomas continued. "The video of you playing at the cafe has now been viewed over 1 million times. People are touched by your story. A documentary filmmaker has approached the Institute about featuring you in a piece about non-traditional students and musical education." "Me? In a documentary?" The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. "Only if you're interested, of course. But your journey could inspire others who've set aside their passions for practical concerns." As they talked, Dean Rivera joined them, congratulating Lily on her performance. "Professor Hahn tells me you're his most improved student this year," she said. High praise coming from him. "I had a lot of catching up to do," Lily replied modestly. "Yes, but not everyone would have put in the work the way you did. That's why we'd like to feature you in our summer recruitment materials if you're willing. Your story embodies what the Institute stands for: excellence, perseverance, and the transformative power of music." Later that evening, after the reception had ended and the concert hall had emptied, Lily found herself alone at the piano on the stage. The cleaning staff had let her stay, recognizing her as a student who often practiced late into the night. In the dimmed lights with no audience to impress, she began to play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the piece that had changed her life that rainy night at Café Lumière. As she played, she reflected on the journey of the past year. There had been moments of doubt, of course. Nights when she questioned whether she was too old to start over, days when younger students mastered techniques that still challenged her. The scholarship covered her tuition and basic expenses, but money was still tight. She continued to work one night a week at the cafe, both for extra income and to stay connected to the people who had supported her from the beginning. But there had also been moments of pure joy. The first time she mastered a difficult piece, the connections she'd formed with fellow music lovers, the growing confidence that she was finally on the right path. Most importantly, she'd rediscovered the part of herself that came alive through music, the part her mother had recognized and nurtured all those years ago. As she played the final notes of the nocturne, Lily heard a noise and looked up to see Thomas standing in the shadows at the back of the hall. He had returned, perhaps guessing she would seek out a quiet moment after the excitement of the day. "Don't stop on my account," he said, walking toward the stage. "I just came back from my program and heard you playing." Lily smiled. "I was playing for my mother. And for you. And for the waitress I was a year ago who didn't believe this was possible." Thomas sat down in the front row, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know, I've been thinking about that night at the cafe. It's strange how small moments can change the course of our lives. If you hadn't come in for dinner that night," Lily began. "Or if you hadn't been working that shift," Thomas added. "Or if I hadn't looked at the piano with such longing." "Life is full of these intersections," Thomas said. "Most of the time we pass through them without noticing. But occasionally we recognize them for what they are. Chances to change course, to become more fully ourselves." Lily nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "I think about how many people must be like I was, working jobs that pay the bills but don't feed their souls, talents going unused, dreams set aside." "Too many," Thomas agreed. "Which is why what you're doing matters. Your story, your music, it reaches people. That video didn't go viral because you're a perfect pianist. It went viral because people recognized the moment of reclaiming something precious that had been lost." From the piano bench, Lily looked out at the empty concert hall, imagining it full of people whose lives might be touched by music the way hers had been. Perhaps some of them would hear her play someday. Perhaps one of them would be inspired to reclaim their own forgotten dreams. "So what's next for you?" Thomas asked. "After you finish your degree?" Lily smiled. "I'm not sure yet. Teaching maybe, performing, both. I just know I want to do for others what you and my mother did for me, help them find the music in themselves." Thomas nodded approvingly. The best way to show gratitude for a gift is to share it with others. Outside, the city was coming alive with evening activities, people heading to restaurants, theaters, homes. A year ago, Lily would have been serving dinner at the cafe, stealing glances at the silent piano. Now she was planning her summer practice schedule, preparing for next year's more advanced classes, imagining possibilities that once seemed out of reach. As she gathered her sheet music and prepared to leave, Lily thought about how a single moment, a wealthy man noticing a waitress's longing glance at a piano, had created ripples that continued to spread outward, touching lives beyond her own. "Ready to go?" Thomas asked, standing. Lily nodded, taking one last look at the piano before following him up the aisle. Ready for whatever comes next. Together, they walked out of the concert hall and into the evening, where new music waited to be played, new stories waited to be lived, and new moments of transformation waited to be recognized when they appeared.